Hello everyone and welcome to the video. You are live with Endeavor Gaming, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Excelsior II, outfitting it with a surgical strikes build and seeing what this thing can do. So let's just go on ahead and get into it. Here we are back in Star Trek Online, so let's just go on ahead and take a look at the build. This is the USS Tahiro, my newest ship, the Excelsior II Intel Heavy Cruiser. So, just to start out, what I've done here is a bit of a modification on my previous Surgical Strikes build. I also tried with Beam Overload. I will say that both builds have been a lot of fun to use, but there have been some shortcomings that we'll get into later in the video. But for now, let's go over the build that we have here. So recently Spencer posted a video on it too. I had originally been running some SensorLink dual phaser beams, and they were fine, but I found that I really wasn't getting enough shots off with them, so I ended up switching to advanced phasers as well, and I found that broadsiding was actually a lot more fun. I don't tend to do it on ships besides my tanks, but had to try new things with a build like this. So, starting off for our 4 weapons, we have the phaser wide-angle dual heavy beam bank, and we have 3 advanced phasers. So, these ones are all rolled for crit D damage, damage times 4. In the future, and what I'm probably going to start doing right now, is getting them rolled for crit D instead, just because that is a much better modifier when running with surgical strikes, because you'll have the crit chance. So what you need to focus on is your crit severity. For our deflector, we have the Elite Fleet Intervention Proto-Mounted Reflector Array. This is a holdover from most of the builds. I've got this one rolled for Shield Cap, Control Expertise, and Shield Cap. We'll get into why a little bit later, but for those of you that know my builds, you already know it's because of Debris Screen. For the Impulse, we're running the competitive Impulse engines. I really just can't get away from these firing modes, so Surgical Strikes is giving us that speed boost. Yes, there is only one firing mode on here that's going to proc it, but we don't really have anything else. We don't run any whole heals on the ship, and we don't really have a whole lot of control abilities unless you include some of our unconventional procs, which might be better. I'd have to try that out and find out. For our Warp Core, we're using the Revolutionary one just really because of the weapon amplification. The Disco one's a pretty solid choice here too. I definitely went back and forth on it. And then for our shields, we have obviously the Discovery Shield. We went for Cap again to feed into that debris screen damage. For our aft weapons, this one has been one I go back and forth on. Sometimes I'm using the Trilithium Enhanced Turret, sometimes I'm using the Omni. Right now I'm using the turret just because I have mixed armaments synergy on this build. Next we have a sensor-linked Omni. I freaking love this thing. I have one, I'm so glad I have one, and I use it as much as I can. And then rounding out, we've got 2 advanced phaser beam arrays. So again, I guess the first shortcoming of this ship that kind of disappointed me was the fact that it's a 4-4. It makes it really hard to build around for a DPS setup. You know, if you're running torps, 4-4 is fine. But this is not set up very well as a torp build, so it's weird. Like, you would also think tank, and I do think you could get some kind of tanking out of this, but the intel seating doesn't really mesh well with that. For our devices, we have energy amplifiers, pretty bog standard, deuterium surplus, the Kobayashi Maru transponder, which, by the way, as of this video, is setting your distress calls on cooldown. This is not supposed to be happening. The devs will start looking into it. I believe they said Monday, December 12th. So hopefully we'll get some news back on that, and I will post an update when and if something happens with that. Next, we have Temporal Negotiator. This is just to fill in some blanks with our, Boimler and hopefully not having too long cooldowns. And then we have Subspace Field Modulator. This was mainly just because I needed something for this 5th slot, and I didn't really know what else to put. It's nice if you're taking some damage, get your damage resistance up a little bit. As long as you're not doing proton damage, you should be golden. Universal consoles. Unsurprisingly, we've got Lorca's Custom Fire Controls. Great console, get that shield pen, get that crit chance, although again, crit chance isn't really what we're focusing on, but again, we also got that 2-piece set and we love it. For our engineering consoles, we've got DPRM, bonus damage, can't go wrong. Use this on as many DPS builds as you can. We have reinforced armaments. This is going to give us haste with that 2-piece set with the trilithium turret that we talked about before. Domino, another haste console, plus a nice amount of bonus damage. And then immolating phaser lance. So this is going to feed into universal designs. Also, this is just a really hard-hitting console, and I love it. For science, we've got debris screen. Again, this is the one I've been using on more and more builds, but if you've got the potential behind it, it does so much damage. So while I was working on the ship, I was able to go more in-depth with how this console works, and here's the rep with it. The amount of immunity hard points that this console gives you is equal to 5 times your maximum shield capacity. So take all of your shield facings together, add them, multiply it by 5. That's how much damage debris screen will block, or how much damage it will do before any bonuses to an enemy when you hit them. It's a fantastic console, comes off the Courier Pilot Raider, and I'm honestly in love with it. Next, we've got binaural infusion circuits. This is for the crit severity. And then we have the new console. So, this console is kind of fun to use. It does a pretty fair amount of damage for what it is, and it shoots out energy weapons at everything. It'll give you fire, will, and overload to your normal weapons, and then it'll also have these auxiliary things that are doing overload at will, and honestly, it does a pretty solid amount of damage. It's kind of like an AoE phaser attack, and for those of you that remember from Star Trek Nemesis, the phasers going out at 0 elevation trying to find the scimitar, this console reminds me a lot of that, so if your Space Barbie brain is lighting up at that, this is going to be a fun console for you. Rounding out for our tactical consoles, we have 3 exploiters and then 1 locator. So I would go 4 exploiters here. The only reason I did it is because I actually don't have 4 exploiter phaser consoles on hand. But any combination of this, right now my crit chance is resting at 45.1 and crit severity of 217.8. On a surgical strikes build, you want that crit severity as high as you can possibly get it, since you're getting a ton of crit chance for your energy weapons from it. So if we ever hover over here, we've got a 30% boost to your critical chance. So the more the merrier. Moving on to our traits. This is where things got interesting, and this is where a lot of different design iterations of my ship sort of came into play. So we've got Good Day to Die. This isn't a surprise. We've got Context is for Kings, Adaptive Offense. We've got Fleet Coordinator, Intelligence Agent Attaché, Superior Beam Training for, that bonus weapon damage, Unconventional Systems, Terran Targeting Systems. We have Anchored. I tried to use this as much as I can. It is a great personal space trait if you can remember to sit still, and it's something I am working on so much. And lastly, we have Boimler. Again, if you've got Boimler, there's no reason not to run it. It is a fantastic personal space trait. It will take care of cooldowns for you. It will save you so much time and effort on builds. Moving on to starship traits, things got even more interesting because a lot of the traits I was using I found wouldn't really work here as a surgical strikes build. So I had to get a little bit creative with it. So we've got universal designs trying to get us that crit severity. We can get up to 50% extra crit severity just by using immolating phaser lance. Vanguard Specialist, this is for the cooldown for surgical strikes. This will have us get us up to about 100% uptime on surgical strikes. Next we have Promise of Ferocity. I just went for bonus damage after a certain point. there are definitely other traits to use, but it was about leveraging actually doing damage with things that would be useful. I wanted to run, things like the best diplomat, but that's only beam overload. I wanted to run things like onboard dilithium crystallizer, but I really only ran one engineering ability, and I just felt like I wouldn't get enough out of it. Strike from the Shadows. This is another one of those that I haven't used in a while, but is a really great trait. This one's going to come into play a lot more when it comes to running ISCs, and you have a tank that's going to draw that aggro off of you. You'll get a nice little boost to your damage, and then a little bit of crit chance if you need it, and it'll decrease your threat generation in the run. Next, we have Emergency Weapon Cycle. This one's kind of a done deal. Weapon power cost and haste. We love haste. And then lastly, we have Exodus Active Probat. This is another one that's giving you bonus weapon damage, and it's giving you stealth. So the idea with the ship was to not draw attention to itself and try to pour out some damage in the run. For our space reputation, we still got weirder. So we've got Tyler's Duality giving us crit chance based on our hull capacity. The only one out of the ordinary is Enhanced Shield Systems. This is just to feed into Debris Screen. If you're not running Debris Screen, I'd recommend something like Landry's Loyalty, since OSS is going to knock your subsystems offline, but I just wanted to see what I could get out of this. I think in the long term I'll end up switching back to Landry's Loyalty because this is really only going to be helpful in something like an ISC, but we'll see. Next we've got Magnified Firepower, nice Cat Tube bonus weapon damage. Then we've got Precision, which is giving us some crit chance, and then Advanced Targeting Systems, which is giving us some crit severity. For the seating, this one, again, made it so difficult. This ship has some interesting seating. It's only got 4 seats, but 3 of them are Lieutenant Commander, and the 4th one is Commander. And it really shook things up as far as how I was going to set everything up. So we've got a full suite of SROs here. We've got Tractor Beam, Scramble Sensors, and Photonic Shockwave. These are our unconventional systems procs. Next, we have our Tactical Officer, which is going to have all the tactical things I thought we would need. We've got Chemocyte. It's a low chance, but that extra explosion is pretty fun. Distributed Targeting. I mean, the more the merrier. And Attack Pattern Omega 1. This is for a little bit more bonus damage. There are times I might want to go Beta instead, but I've come to really like Attack Pattern Omega. For our Intel, we have a mix of basically the backbone of things we need for the ship. So we've got Viral Impulse Burst, which is another unconventional proc. We have Override Subsystem Safeties for our power levels, some to help us manage some more stuff. Just keep in mind that it is going to knock a subsystem offline. Emergency Powered Weapons, again for our bonus energy weapon damage. And then Surgical Strikes, the main ability of the build. And then for our last science seat, we've got Jam Targeting Sensors, again as an Exodus and an unconventional systems proc. And then we've got Narrow Sensor Bands 2 for bonus damage, and Mixed Armaments Synergy 2 for the bonus damage. So lastly, but certainly not least, we have our duty officers. And just as a quick reminder, and I'll put this in basically every video for the foreseeable future, if you have not already, start protecting your duty officers. You need to protect them. So go to your active roster, right click them, and change protected status to on. Otherwise, if you go to donate duty officers to your fleet projects, it will just start putting them in there, and you could give up some really nice ones, including Borg duty officers. So be careful, everybody. Make sure to set them to protected if you don't want to lose them. Now, moving on. For our duty officers, we've got Vincent Kish. So I realize now that this one doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. There was a time when I was running a CSV on this, but that doesn't really fit as much now because I don't have a firing mode that's going to benefit from something like this. So the choices here would be something like a con officer if you want a little bit of extra maneuverability. You could do crit chance buff on firing energy weapons. That would also be a great one. The choice is really up to you. Next, we've got 32 of 47. So this one is crit severity and exotic damage. It's going to give a little bit of a buff to some of these science abilities, but it's mainly just for that crit severity boost on activating science abilities. So again, here's another one that, frankly, I need to go in and change, where I had this beam overload bridge officer while I was messing around and trying to figure out stuff to use. I would probably replace this with a con officer then. And the same with this guy. Again, the duty officers for here got really, really difficult to choose. Because Borg duty officers are great, and they fit in very well here. But and a big, big but. This isn't, a torpedo build, and it's not a beam overload build, which is what I normally prepare for. Also, there's the overwhelming fact that you can only run 3 security officers at a time, which makes me a little bit sad, but that is what it is. So we'll just throw on our Space Warfare Specialist, give us a little bit of extra damage versus Borg. Next, we've got 19 of 47. This is power levels to max and weapon armor penetration. And then lastly, we've got 24 of 47. So this is going to be power levels to max and crit chance. So now that we've taken a look at the build, let's go ahead and take it into a patrol and see how it performs.
Looks like our fight got them to notice us. Let's go over and ask if their saw might come out of hiding. Keep concentrating fire on individual ships. Separate them and whittle down their numbers. We will not go quietly. Thank you for your assistance, and welcome to this sector.
Though, in Wanted, this ship didn't have a problem getting through things. I definitely found that Surgical Strikes was able to melt through enemies a whole heck of a lot faster than the beam overload build I was running on it was, so... Now, let's test its survivability. Let's see how it does in a prolonged engagement where it's getting debuffed and it's taking attacks from all sides. Maybe get a couple of great shots off with that new console.
Good to see you, my friend.
rift's unstable. We need to hurry, or those ships will make it.
Truly. Our systems
Under the...
Ship is under attack.
That's one less rift to worry about. Let's regroup with Kumarkin.
Bad news, I'm afraid. Klingons are approaching our... think that was indeed.
Well, the ship was able to make it through that patrol without a problem either. There's really only one more test left to do, so let's just go on ahead and take it into an infected elite and see how it performs and then do a parse breakdown.
The situation is grim. All attempts to hail the starbase have failed.
You will lower your shields and prepare to be boarded.
Scanning the nanite drift. Guys, there's something that's moving.
Taking a look at that ISE, this is actually one of the best runs I have managed to have in this ship. The Excelsior II managed to do 472.73k DPS, which is pretty solid. You know, I would put that right in the rank of where like a Surgical Strikes build should be performing, anywhere between 400 and 600k in a solid run. Only took in 1.61% of the damage, 2.84% of the attacks in, and managed to have a very nice max one hit of 1.884 million, very likely from debris screen. So, taking a look at the things that did damage in this run, first we have our Advanced Phaser Beam Ray with Surgical Strikes 3, which is very nice. It was the vast majority of our damage there, 197k DPS, max one of 334k, pretty nice, hit rate 100%, and a crit rate of 100%. Oh, we love to see it. Got the Phaser Wide Angle Dual Heavy Beam Bank on Surgical Strikes right behind it. Again, hit rates and crit rates of 100%. We love to see it. Max one hit of 551k. Then we've got our sensor-linked beam ray, or actually, yeah, no, I believe that should be our sensor-linked phaser beam array with a crit rate of 100% again and a hit rate of 100%. Immolating Phaser Lance coming up next. Like I said, I love this console with how much damage it does. Our Trilithium Phaser Turret, again, a little bit farther behind, obviously it's under debris screen. And we've got our Auxiliary Phaser Beam Ray. This is the beam from the console. So one thing I've noticed that it has kind of a low crit rate, and I don't know what's going on, but like, I've seen it crit for, my friend Alpha and Trank, but I haven't been getting any crits on this thing at all, which is strange. But even with that, it managed to do about 8.8k DPS all by itself. Solid amount of hits, didn't miss, love to see it. Obviously didn't have much of a maximum hit, but it's a nice little bonus, and honestly, I enjoyed it. So now that we've taken the ship into combat, let's do a little bit more of a detailed breakdown. Overall, I like this ship. I think it's really strong at what it does. My gripes with the ship is that it's not the best at anything that it does. As a surgical strikes platform, it's fine. It's not going to outperform the legendary D7, which is also my really big gripe because that ship costs about the same amount of money to get when it's on sale. So if I was going for a surgical strikes build, I'd rather have that legendary D7, plus that's going to be an account unlocked one, versus this that is character unlocked. And I think the overwhelming thing that makes this one worse than the legendary D7 is the fact that it's a heavy cruiser. Which is a point I made to a couple of people over on the Discord. The heavy cruiser and the cruisers in general kind of exist in a weird state. They are one of only 2 ship classes now not capable of utilizing dual cannons. The other one being science vessels, which obviously get the benefit of science abilities and a secondary deflector. Cruisers, on the other hand, are just cruisers. They don't get specific perks for being an engineering ship. There's no secondary deflector, they just have slightly more hull, which I don't think is really even with what science ships have. So, I think the things I would change with the ship are giving it the ability to use dual heavy cannons, to be honest, and I think that would go a long way to fixing the ship. Because without it, you can't really run a really solid, beam overload hybrid build. You can't run a CSV build of any kind. Since it's got intel seating, it's not great for torps. So it's really limited on what you can do with it. It is a surgical strike ship through and through, and it is an alright one. Now, that being said, I do not regret buying the ship. It looks fantastic. I love flying it. It's going to go through ISEs without a problem. There's nothing to worry about. On damage, I probably rate this out of 10 around a 6.5, maybe a 7 when it's doing really well. I was able to get about 470k in that ISE, so it's definitely not bad. For survivability, honestly, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. The benefit of it being an intel ship, when you run Exodus, you can keep yourself pretty far away from the danger, and I like that about the ship. So, overall, I like the ship. I don't regret buying it. But what do you guys think of the Excelsior II? Let me know down in the comments, or reach out to me over on the Discord to talk more about it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that subscribe button so you can get notified of future videos. I always appreciate it. Well, I'll be back for the next video sooner than you think. As always, you have been live with Endeavor Gaming, and remember to keep calm and game on.